Hello and welcome to another episode of this season of Try This on Wisp Sports. I'm your host, Dr. Kirstin Lauritzen, and today I have some news. We're just going to call it news. So today, this episode is going to be the final episode of this podcast. We are wrapping it up and moving forward to hopefully great things. It's been such an amazing journey. And I know that I have connected with many of you through this podcast. And for that, I am so grateful for the opportunity to be able to have connected with you and to have served you and provided information that I hope has helped you in some way, as far as in triathlon or anything like that. I have learned so much from this journey and this podcast. You and many of you have been along for the ride. You've listened and heard a lot of the lessons and things that I've learned along the way. So I thought today what I would do is put together a summary, a summary of the last couple of years. You know, we started this podcast originally as a sound bite, and you can still find that. You can find all of the previous episodes here as well, where we talked about a bunch of nutrition and micronutrients and things like that, because ultimately one of my biggest goals in doing what I do is helping athletes be able to avoid micronutrient deficiencies. And because I saw that as such a major thing that was holding a lot of athletes back. If you can think about that, right? You know, we've talked a lot on this podcast about iron deficiency and vitamin Bs like B12. We've talked about vitamin D. We've talked about the benefits of making sure that you have all the right micronutrients and like vitamins and minerals, as well as making sure that you have a balance of macros like protein, carbohydrates, and fats coming in. And one of the things that first brought me to working with athletes is seeing athletes dealing with micronutrient deficiencies that I felt could have easily been avoided. And so to me, seeing athletes having to drop out of races and not being able to compete and continue their season, that to me seemed like something that was that should have been something that should have been avoided, and that could easily be something that didn't have to happen. So I started out on this journey of hoping to educate more people and hopefully change their trajectory in their performance and in their sports careers, from amateur athletes and age groupers like me to pros and elite athletes that are functioning at a very, very, very high level. And along the way, I've learned a lot from that. I've learned how to ultimately apply functional medicine principles to athletes. And I've learned how to use testing and how to really just take those things and not just help athletes with like preventing micronutrient deficiencies and chronic issues, but also how to really optimize those for performance. Like on this podcast, we've talked a lot about your gut. We've talked a lot about mitochondria that are your energy producers. We've talked a lot about the bacteria and all of these things that your body needs in order to be able to function well. Right? Not just good, but really, really well. And to the point that you can achieve whatever it is that you're setting out to accomplish. And part of that is making sure that the body has absolutely everything that it needs at the right levels so that it can do that. Right? So some of the lessons that I've learned in triathlon, at least, is that, you really can do whatever it is that you want to set out to do. I mean, I started this journey barely being able to swim 25 yards, like dying, being at the other side of the pool. And now 3 years later, that's not that long, is it? 3 years later, I am swimming well. I'm making huge leaps as far as, feeling really, really good in the pool and being able to swim faster than I ever thought that I could and longer than I ever thought that I could. And I'm now also, just thrilled with seeing that cycling is something that I've really come to love and come to enjoy. And it was a very big surprise coming out of all of this that that the bike portion of it was going to be something that I enjoyed a lot. And I learned a lot about myself too, as far as on the run side. It's interesting because I have never said that I'm a runner ever. I never would have identified with that. And now I do feel very much so like I am a runner. I am also a triathlete. And that to me is something that is really, really cool, because I've realized that, you don't have to be the best in order to do these events. If this is something that you've looked at and you've thought, I think that would be really interesting, but I have a lot of hesitation in getting into that because of whatever reason that might be. To me, and this might sound cliche, but to me, I think anybody can do this. Anybody. It just takes a little bit of time and it takes some consistent effort. And for some of you, you might be able to do that on your own. For some of you, getting a coach might be a really, really good fit. Ultimately, though, you can do it. If this is something that you've been, because this podcast ultimately started out as just being a way to try to bridge the gap between people who wanted to start out in triathlon, but maybe weren't quite there yet. And maybe you're just starting the exploration of wanting to check it out and see if it might be for you. Because a lot of the people who are interviewed on podcasts are usually the pros or the elites that have spent a lot of time in triathlon. And so it can seem like the gap from where you start to getting even remotely, to a higher level of performance seems like a really, really, really big gap. What I learned from this journey, though, is that you can do it. I never would have, I honestly, like, running a mile for me was hard. It was really hard. And I didn't like to do it. I hated it, actually. But when I set out to do triathlon, though, I was like, I'm going to try something that I'm not good at. And I wanted to become good at, and I wanted to prove that I could. Now, I learned also that part of that was rooted in a belief that in order for me to be successful, everything had to be hard. If you just heard that and you were like, oh my gosh, that's me. There's so much that you can do around that and work on that as a belief. And that belief might actually be holding you back from some of the things that you're wanting to achieve, because things in life don't actually have to be hard. They actually can be easy. And those beliefs, they trigger your actions. They trigger what you end up doing. They are in part how you filter everything coming in through your world. So when you have a belief like that, and we all do, because we all gain these beliefs. We learn these things when we're kids, because at certain points you have to make a choice. And so we end up making choices throughout different experiences throughout our life that then end up giving us these beliefs because they are serving us. They taught us something at that time. What happens, though, is when you get later on into life, you start to realize that those beliefs aren't serving you anymore. So what we want to do is we want to take the lessons from what those beliefs taught us back then and then move forward with a new belief, one that actually fits into the identity or the thing that you want, or the person or the goal that you want to achieve, or in the person you want to become, the identity that you want. These are the things that in many ways end up holding a lot of people back, because the beliefs then trigger actions, which then perpetuate certain events and certain things that continue to happen and continue to move forward. For example, running is hard. Well, if you continue to believe that and you continue to act and live into that belief that running is hard, well, yeah, running's going to be really freaking hard, right? So you can start to see, and I kind of make light of it in that sense, but you can start to see how where these beliefs can actually really hold you back from being able to move forward. And that's a really rudimentary, I think, surface level belief, and they can get deeper and deeper into finances, into relationships and all of those things. Or, I am an athlete or I'm not an athlete, whether you identify with that or not. Those beliefs can ultimately really create what comes out of those beliefs. They create a reality. They create the life that you live into. So sometimes what is needed is really being able to break through some of those beliefs so that then you're able to move forward into a new identity, into that new thing that you're wanting to become, or that new thing that you're wanting to create. It's a really different and a really interesting place to be. So those are some things that I've learned. I've also learned that I wanted to really, I really did believe that, and you can hear that in the past tense, I really did believe that if I wanted to be successful, everything had to be really hard, everything. And I think in some ways that's what drew me to triathlon. It's because to me, that was really hard because it didn't come easily to me. And what I found through this journey is that you can be a triathlete at any level and you can do it. You absolutely can do it. Even if you have literally no experience not being a swimmer when you were a kid or never having really run a mile in your life. I accomplished an Ironman. It's a huge, huge feat. And I still have huge goals. Like triathlon and I are not done. I still really want to do the Norseman and I really want to qualify for Kona. Those are really, really big goals. The thing is something else that I've learned throughout this process is that health and you are your top priority. One of the things that happened, as many of you know, is that at Coeur d'Alene, I ended up with a lot of heat stress. And then in subsequent races, I further hurt my body by getting deeper and deeper into heat stress. And then what ended up happening is I've now created an association with heat and reactions, and that affects my health. The hard part is that part of what you have to do then is break down that the neurological pathways, those neurons, how they fire together. They become like an Autobahn. And when you start creating a new pathway, it is kind of like a footpath versus an Autobahn. And so part of what you have to do is lay down new pathways. One of the things that I did with an athlete of mine is we worked really hard on her last marathon to have her go into it to have a really, really good race, because she had identified or had believed in some way or shape or form that races, these marathons, were always going to be really hard, that she was always going to have issues in those marathons. Or she was always going to, not sleep well the night before, and they were going to cause a lot of anxiety, and that there was just something that was going to go wrong, and there was going to be in some way that she wasn't going to enjoy it. And what we did is we structured everything so that she would have a successful race that she could feel really proud of and really excited about. And sure enough, what came out of that is she felt she was faster than she had run any marathon yet, and had also enjoyed the entire race and had so much fun. And then on top of that, she also felt like she could run even further and didn't have a situation of low energy or bonking or any issues with hydration or needing to stop at the bathroom multiple times from overhydrating. All of those things we accomplished in that race. And so in that way, we have now laid down a new pathway and a new neurological connection. New neurons are firing, that marathons are enjoyable, that they're going to be fun, that she loves to do them, because that's why she got into it in the first place. So you could start to see where, if you are making these neurological connections like I did, that, if I exercise in the heat, I'm going to get hives. And if I get stressed, I'm going to break out in issues with my skin. You can absolutely lay down new pathways, but part of what you have to do you have to break down those old ones. So one of the things that I've learned is that I absolutely have to put my health first. And that if anybody's going to take care of me, it's going to be me. Right. So I still have Victoria coming up at the end of May, and I'm super excited about that race. I'm really, really looking forward to it. And I've had a very interesting training season this year, these past couple of months dealing with health issues. And I'm also learning that sometimes you really do need to take a break. And sometimes you really do need to just sort of force that. And I think for a while I was fighting that because I felt like all of these things, having to recover and having to take a break should be something that could be avoided. Because if you're, doing all these things that I help people with, that's what we want to try to do. And yet there are learning lessons in all of these things. So sometimes stuff happens that forces us to learn something. And that's ultimately where I'm at. So I'm learning the next phase, which is you got to take care of yourself. You got to take care of your health because your health is really, really important. And that goes for everything, right? Like if we've talked about thyroid, we've talked about gut, we've talked about gut issues, we've talked about all sorts of things, fatigue, we've talked about all sorts of things on this podcast. And if you have an identity that's rooted in that, having GI issues or having thyroid issues or having really low energy or fatigue, you're just always inflamed, you're always in pain. If you've identified, if you've created an identity around that, there's you first, one of the biggest things I've learned as far as working with athletes is that you have to be able to break through that identity. And it's not always easy, right? Like some people are like, oh, well, just do da-da-da. Or yeah, just do it, or just let it go, or just the list of things is just like trying to simplify and make it so easy, and that doesn't always work. If something feels really hard, there's a reason, and sometimes we just need a little bit of support to help us break that down, so that we can then move forward. Sometimes it's as simple as listening to a story. The brain listens and it learns. Sometimes it's a little bit deeper and you really need to dig into the mindset. You need to dig into those limiting beliefs and you need to dig into where that came from. Because maybe it's a story that originally happened in your past and you're still dealing with the repercussions of that now. So, I wanted to talk about this today because I really do think that, especially for this podcast, we haven't talked a whole lot about mindset. And we haven't talked a whole lot about how health and your brain are really connected. We've also talked a lot on this podcast about inflammation and the importance of recovery and nutrition. We've talked about fueling and hydration. And there are so many beliefs around this, right? Like that it's hard to know and it seems random, but I'm always cramping on my races, or I have absolutely no idea what to do as far as fueling goes for my races, or I have absolutely no idea how much to eat or what to eat. And all of those things are in some way, shape, or form a belief. And part of what we want to do is give you the information that you need, but also make sure that you know that you can also trust yourself to know what you need. And that you can absolutely be confident in the plan that you have and what we do is we test that, right? We create a plan, we have you test it. And through that process, what we're doing is we're helping you to learn new strategies. We're helping you to learn new pathways. We're helping you to learn new ways of doing things, so that instead of you defaulting at a race to just picking and choosing whatever is on the table because you aren't thinking about it and you don't know what to do, what we want to do is be able to help you ultimately make good choices and know that you have the confidence that even if something goes wrong, you can absolutely make a good choice and do the right thing that's going to help you get to that finish line feeling amazing. And ultimately, what we really want to do too is we want to make sure that you believe that it can be simple and that you can have that confidence and not necessarily that it has to be hard and that it's always going to happen. And that the only option that you have is to stop racing because you can't figure out the solution to those problems. I think that's the biggest thing I've learned is that there are always options. And if you are in a place where you are very stressed, the options become less and less. You see less options. You only focus on one solution, which is survival. And until you're able to break out of that and get into that rest and digest and thrive, that parasympathetic place of the nervous system, until you're able to get there, where all of the choices are available, there's so many options in that space. There's a lot of creativity. Until you're able to get there and live there for a lot of your life, it's always going to seem like you're just living to the next phase. It's just like survival, right? You're always making that one choice that's going to get you to that next spot. So, and there is only one choice, is how it feels like. And sometimes it can feel super defeating, and it can feel really frustrating. And it can feel like you're really alone in that space. And like there are no solutions to the problem. If you've dealt with anything along your life and in your journey, I guarantee you've probably felt something along those lines, because I know I have. Ultimately though, right? Like ultimately in the end, you have likely overcome a lot of things. And because of that, you've learned some things. And so the point here in all of this and me sharing this is that if you felt those things, or if you are in that place, it can feel like there are no options, but there actually are a ton of options. And the thing is here too, like you might need a little help and support in being able to get to that place. But your body knows and your brain knows what it needs and what it needs to do. It's a really, really incredible thing. Your body knows what it needs. And so sometimes all we need to do is just get in there and allow your body to tell you what it needs. And that's what we call subconscious reprogramming, where you get into the brain and you put the conscious mind away for a little bit, and you allow your unconscious mind to be able to actually get through and tell you what it's learned, what it needs. And that could be a really powerful thing, especially when you consider that a lot of sport is about mindset. And it's about how your brain, as I've just mentioned here, how it fires different pathways and different neurons that then ultimately lead to behaviors. It's a really, really cool thing to do for somebody if they are struggling to achieve a goal that they want, or bypass a health issue, get through a health issue. There's a lot that the brain controls. And it goes both ways. There's mindset. The brain itself is really powerful, and physiology in the body can interact, and they both can go back and forth like the chicken and the egg almost. But these are the things that I've learned. Like this is the journey that I've been on over the past 3 years in triathlon, and it hasn't stopped yet. So I just wanted to say thank you for going on this journey with me. And for those of you who have reached out, that have been listening to the podcast, and you've engaged and you've told me something that you've learned and you've said hello, I really appreciate you for being here and for listening to this podcast and listening to the journey. I hope that you have received something from this that has helped you move forward in some way. And I would love it if you would come over and say hi on social media. And let me know if there's something you have learned. I would love to hear from you. You can find me at Dr. Kirstin, literally at Dr. Kirstin on Instagram or Facebook. So come on over and say hello. I would love to hear from you. And if there's anything that you've learned from the podcast, I would love for you to come over and say hi. And that's also where you can follow me if you want to learn more and follow along. That's where you can find me. And yeah, I just have so much gratitude to Wisp Sports for opening up this platform to me and being able to give a voice to women that may not be pro or elite athletes, but are age groupers. And there's a lot of you out there that are just like me. And it's been an honor to be able to be and create for this platform and for Wisp Sports, and the relationships and friendships that I've formed through it. I'm just so grateful for. So I appreciate you all for listening, and I hope that you will come over and say hello. And this is where we wrap up. So thank you for listening. And if you want to go back to any of the recordings and any of the episodes, they are available to you and you can access those whenever you'd like. And I hope that I will cross paths with you all soon. So take care. I hope that you are pursuing the goals that you are excited about. And if there's anything that I can do to serve you, I would love to do so. So thank you for listening. And hopefully I'll get to talk to some of you soon. Take care.